Hello there. Happy Monday. Okay, I've got an email from someone, haven't got a name here, and the person writes, "Hi Tabitha, do you have an opinion on why some people become bigger than their body needs to be healthy? I'm in recovery from restrictive eating disorder myself. I just feel like most people who are in a big frame blame it on emotional eating and not being able to control their eating. But if the body is designed to be at a healthy weight set point, why would that happen? Is it a product of a restrictive mindset? That makes sense. Restrictive thoughts such as, open brackets, I shouldn't eat this, close brackets, may make the body confused and think there's scarcity. But it's just there are also kids who are obese and people who don't think restrictively at all, but just eat a lot and end up really big. You say that there's no such thing as emotional eating, or rather all eating is emotional, and that all hunger is real, but then where does it go wrong to the point of negative health consequences of being over the set point range? I guess the whole thing is that your natural set point is where you feel good and healthy and aren't restricting. So maybe your body likes more calories or sweet or fatty things or whatever because it needs to be at a little higher than someone else's. And then you crave it more and have a harder time not eating those things than someone else might. But then why do some people just crave more than they need? Obviously, I'm afraid of my mental hunger, currently being hungry for more than I need. But if I understand that is why excessive hunger happens for some people and what it isn't, then I think I'll have an easier time surrendering unconditionally to my own hunger. All right, well, I understood most of that message, not all of it. Mainly, I understood that you're scared of gaining weight. Welcome to anorexia. Okay, but the question, I think, is, yes, some people are in larger bodies. Why would a person's body do that when it seemingly makes them less healthy? All right, and I think you understand the concept that if somebody goes on a diet, then that makes their body believe that food is scarce, and therefore then their body wants to eat more food. And some people's bodies, it's like some people, we all have these different genetic reactions, right? My genetic reaction when I went into energy deficit is anorexia, which is like migration mode, move, and barely eat anything. My husband, on the other hand, I think his family, and he's never had an eating disorder or anything, but he's just in a different body set. He's got different family genetics than I have. And it seems to be that in his family, when people go on diets, the opposite thing happens. They become really low energy, don't want to do very much. Their body's lower metabolism. They actually gain weight fast if they're on a diet because they crave eating. It's a bit like hibernating. The body's going, oh, well, we're going into famine. So obviously what I need to do is lower my metabolism, rest a lot, and gain as much weight as possible to prepare me for what's going to happen. So those are two, what I'd say, genetic responses to the same thing, energy deficit. So if the thing that you've got to remember is that the body's only agenda is to survive as long as possible and be healthy. So if a person's body, say if someone's yo-yo dieting, they keep on going on a diet, low metabolism lowers, and then it doesn't matter if they're not somebody who genetically is predisposed to losing a lot of weight in energy deficit, so somebody with, say, my husband's genetics rather than mine, their body still lowers metabolism. The body still thinks that food is scarce, so those food cravings still come, so they break their diet, they eat a load of food, and then because their metabolism is lower, they gain weight, and so they weren't a low weight in the first place, so they go, oh shit, I've got to go on another diet because I've got to lose this weight, so they do the same thing, they restrict food. The body lowers metabolism even more. The body gets more worried about food scarcity and says, shit, this famine keeps on coming back, so I'm going to have to increase my set point and gain more weight to prepare me for this famine coming back. They break the diet because diets aren't sustainable for that reason. You can't fight your biology. And they eat a load of food. Their metabolism's low, so they gain more weight. The same thing happens. They go, shit, I've got to go on another diet. So that's why, that's kind of like, there's been science studies, I forget any authors or names right now, but if you Google why diets don't work, you'll understand a little bit more. That's kind of the set point theory about why when some people go on a diet, most people go on a diet, it actually leads to them being in a larger body. So that is the body's agenda being healthier. The body's being smart. The body's going, I keep going into famine. So therefore, the healthiest thing for me to do would be to increase my body weight. So that's why, despite the fact that you might not look at that person and think that that person looks optimally healthy, that person's body thinks that it's being optimally healthy, and it is doing that based on the circumstances it's being given, because our bodies are so smart. So it doesn't really matter if somebody is in a much larger body, it doesn't matter what you looking at them perceives to be, if that person's body is as optimally healthy as it could be or not. That person's body has made that decision that given the environmental circumstances that it's in, it needs to gain more weight in order to be optimally healthy. And there may be, for that body, long-term consequences that aren't optimally healthy. But the body still made that decision that in order to optimize health, that's what it needs to do. So I'm not going to completely go wait, because that's like a big long story. But the other question that I think is in here that you asked is like, well, there's some children that seem to be overweight. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter how old or young you are. The same things can still happen with food scarcity. But I wanted to bring something up that's super interesting. There have been studies into population. Well, there's theories, let's say, around what happens if and I put this in my book, Rehabilitate, Rewire, Recover, and I can't remember the author or anything like that, but I did put this in somewhere in my book because I thought it was really interesting that something, studies showing that, say, if a woman, pregnant woman, she may be in this culture where it's like, you can be pregnant, but you still need to eat healthy and you still need to not gain too much weight, right? So maybe this pregnant woman is restricting a bit. What message does that give the fetus? That fetus is being given the message that food is scarce. And so therefore, wouldn't it make sense when that baby is born, that that baby has this predisposition to act as if food is scarce and therefore want to intake a lot of food from the get-go? And there's been studies that's shown, and I think it's mostly been done in rats and animals, that when the mummy rats aren't actually given enough food, maybe there's a little bit of restrictive diet for the mummy rats, the baby rats, when they get born, are predisposed to binge eating disorder, to eating more food, right? So basically, you could call it binge eating disorder. I don't like binge eating disorder because I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's actually really smart. There's nothing wrong with those baby rats' bodies. They're doing the smart thing. The baby rats think that there's food scarcity. So the baby rats' brains are saying, you should come right out of the womb and start eating as much as you can. Find food and eat food. Yeah, you got to go for it because you got to do that to survive. That's not a disorder. That's really smart. The problem is that there isn't any food scarcity, actually. The mummy rat was just restricting. So then the baby rat comes out with this predisposition to act as if there's food scarcity, but there's no food scarcity. So it eats and eats and eats and eats and gains a bit of weight. And so this is the problem that I think, when you wonder why some people just seem to be born to eat a load of food the second they came out the womb, maybe it's worth asking the question if mummy restricted while they were in the room. Anyway, it's just an interesting question, isn't it? And I'll try and find that study and I'll try and link to it in this video if I can remember. I'm not very good, but it's there somewhere. And I just think you got to kind of like think past this default. We have this like reflex reaction, knee-jerk reaction to going, if somebody eats a lot of food, it's just they're fucking bad. They're just a greedy, horrible person if they eat a lot of food. Why does our culture have that reaction? Why can't we sit there like, oh, well, that's interesting, that person's body is seeming to decide that eating a load of food is a smart and intelligent thing to do? Can we actually have a think about why that might be? What has that person's body experienced, even maybe before that person was born, that has led that person's brain to believe that intaking a lot of food is a smart and intelligent thing to do? So it's kind of like, why can't we actually, rather than be blame, look at things and think, oh, that's evidently happening for a reason, probably a biological one. Let's explore that before we throw an emotional load of shit at someone and their body. Anyway, so that's just my thoughts on that.